The real reason awakened souls leave churches forever. In the depths of ancient spiritual texts lies a warning that religious institutions have desperately tried to bury for centuries. Tonight, we unveil a truth so profound, so earth-shattering, that it threatens the very foundations of organized religion as we know it. The chosen ones, those blessed with divine sight and spiritual discernment, are abandoning churches in unprecedented numbers. But this isn't rebellion against God. This is awakening to a higher calling that transcends the walls of any earthly temple. What if I told you that the very institutions claiming to bring you closer to the divine are actually creating barriers between you and your Creator? What if the unease you feel during Sunday services isn't doubt, but divine intuition, warning you that something has gone terribly wrong? The ancient mystics knew this day would come. They prophesied that in the final ages, the chosen would recognize the counterfeit and seek the authentic connection that their souls desperately crave. This isn't just another spiritual discussion. This is a revelation that could transform your entire relationship with the sacred. The signs are everywhere, hidden in plain sight for those with eyes to see. The chosen ones are receiving a call that echoes from the very throne of creation, pulling them away from man-made structures towards something infinitely more pure and powerful. If you've ever felt that magnetic pull away from religious conformity, if you've ever sensed there's something deeper calling your name, then you are exactly where you need to be. Stay with us until the very end, because what we're about to reveal will not only validate every spiritual instinct you've ever had, but it will also show you the pathway to a divine connection so authentic, so transformative, that it will revolutionize every aspect of your existence. The chosen ones know something that others don't. Tonight, you'll discover what that is. The spiritual awakening. Throughout history, there have always been souls who possessed an otherworldly sensitivity to spiritual truth. These individuals, known throughout mystical traditions as the chosen ones, carry within them an inner compass that points unerringly toward divine authenticity. They cannot be deceived by spiritual counterfeits, no matter how convincing the presentation might be. This supernatural discernment is both a gift and a burden, for it means they must often walk paths that others fear to tread. When a chosen soul steps into a modern religious institution, something profound and unsettling occurs. Their spiritual sensors immediately detect the dissonance between what is being proclaimed and what is being practiced. It's as if they can see through multiple dimensions simultaneously, perceiving not just the physical realm of polished pews and stained glass windows, but also the spiritual atmosphere that permeates the space. They sense the genuine versus the manufactured, the sacred versus the commercial, the divine versus the human ego masquerading as holiness. This sensitivity isn't a character flaw or a sign of spiritual pride. Rather, it's a divine alarm system that alerts them when something claiming to represent the Creator has strayed from its true purpose. The chosen ones understand intuitively that true spirituality cannot be contained within human-constructed boundaries, no matter how beautifully decorated or historically significant those boundaries might be. They recognize that the infinite nature of the divine transcends any attempt to capture it within organizational structures, denominational doctrines, or institutional hierarchies. The modern church landscape presents unique challenges that didn't exist in earlier spiritual movements. What was once a gathering of humble seekers united in their desire to connect with the divine has, in many cases, transformed into something that more closely resembles a corporate enterprise than a sacred community. The chosen ones witness this transformation with profound sadness, recognizing that the very essence of spiritual communion has been compromised by concerns that have nothing to do with the soul's journey toward enlightenment. When these spiritually Awakened individuals attempt to find their place within traditional religious structures. They often experience a deep sense of displacement. It's not that they've lost their faith or turned away from the divine. Quite the opposite. Their faith has evolved beyond the limitations that institutional religion attempts to place upon it. They've outgrown the spiritual infancy that requires external authorities to interpret divine will for them, and they've stepped into a mature relationship with the Creator that is direct, personal, and unmediated. This evolutionary leap in spiritual consciousness creates an inevitable tension. The chosen ones find themselves caught between two worlds: the familiar landscape of organized religion with its comforting rituals and social connections, and the vast, uncharted territory of direct divine communion that calls to them from beyond the boundaries of human tradition. The pull toward this higher calling becomes increasingly irresistible as their spiritual sensitivity continues to develop and refine itself through experience and inner cultivation. The materialism crisis. One of the most disturbing revelations the chosen souls encounter in their spiritual journey is witnessing how sacred spaces have been transformed into marketplaces. The very temples that should represent humanity's highest aspirations toward the divine have become infected with the same materialistic values that dominate secular society. This isn't merely about collecting donations for legitimate charitable work. This is about a fundamental corruption of priorities that places financial gain above spiritual growth and material accumulation above divine connection. The ancient wisdom teachings warned us about this exact scenario. In the Christian tradition, we see Jesus himself confronting the money changers who had turned his Father's house into a den of commerce. This wasn't a random outburst of anger from the Prince of Peace. It was a demonstration of righteous indignation at the desecration of sacred space. The chosen ones of today witness this same desecration, but now it's institutionalized, systematized, and presented as normal operating procedure. Walk into many modern churches, and you'll find elaborate sound systems worth tens of thousands of dollars, LED screens displaying professionally produced graphics, and architectural designs that cost millions to construct and maintain. Meanwhile, the homeless sleep on the streets just outside these magnificent edifices, and congregants struggle with debt, depression, and spiritual emptiness. The contrast is not lost on those who possess divine discernment. They see the resources that could transform lives being poured into impressive but ultimately empty displays of religious theater. The chosen ones are particularly sensitive to the manipulation tactics employed by institutions that have prioritized fundraising over soul care. They recognize when fear-based messaging is being used to extract donations, when guilt is weaponized to increase tithing, and when promises of divine blessing are contingent upon financial contributions. This isn't the gospel that transforms hearts and liberates spirits. This is spiritual extortion, dressed up in biblical language and delivered with practiced sincerity. Perhaps even more troubling is the way spiritual leaders within these institutions have embraced lifestyles that directly contradict the humility and simplicity that their own scriptures teach. Private jets, luxury automobiles, million-dollar homes, and designer clothing have become symbols of God's favor rather than indicators of spiritual compromise. The chosen ones witness this contradiction and feel a deep sense of revulsion, not because they believe poverty is necessarily more spiritual than prosperity, but because they recognize the corruption of heart that occurs when material success becomes the measure of divine approval. The biblical warning that you cannot serve both God and money isn't merely a suggestion for the spiritually minded. It's a fundamental law of spiritual physics. When an institution or individual attempts to pursue both masters simultaneously, the result is always spiritual compromise and eventual corruption. The chosen ones understand this principle at a cellular level, which is why they cannot remain comfortable in environments where this law is being violated on a systematic basis. This materialism crisis extends beyond just financial concerns. It represents a complete inversion of spiritual values, where the external has become more important than the internal, where appearance matters more than authenticity, and where human approval is sought more desperately than divine acceptance. The chosen ones hunger for communities that prioritize inner transformation over outer presentation, depth over superficiality, and genuine spiritual growth over impressive membership statistics. The direct connection revelation. When chosen souls begin to distance themselves from institutional religion, they don't abandon their faith. Instead, they embark on the most profound spiritual adventure possible, discovering direct communion with the divine. This journey represents a return to the original design for human-creator relationship, before it became filtered through human hierarchies, denominational interpretations, and institutional requirements. It's a rediscovery of the truth that the kingdom of heaven exists within each individual soul, accessible at any moment through sincere seeking and open-hearted receptivity. The practice of direct prayer becomes transformed when approached outside the constraints of religious formality. Instead of reciting memorized phrases or following prescribed formulas, prayer becomes a spontaneous conversation with infinite love. It's like the difference between reading a script in a play and having a heartfelt discussion with your closest friend. The chosen ones discover that the divine is not offended by informal language, honest questions, or raw emotional expression. In fact, this authenticity creates a deeper connection than any amount of religious propriety ever could. Meditation takes on new dimensions when practiced as a tool for divine communion rather than simply stress reduction or mental discipline. The chosen ones learn to use meditative states to quiet the constant chatter of human thinking and create space for divine whispers to be heard. In these moments of profound stillness, they receive insights, guidance, and comfort that surpass anything they ever experienced through sermons, study groups, or religious ceremonies. They discover that God's voice is not loud and dramatic, but gentle and persistent, speaking in the language of intuition, synchronicity, and inner knowing. If what we're sharing resonates with your soul's deepest knowing, then you're part of this chosen generation that's being called to a higher spiritual reality. Don't let this message disappear into the digital void. Subscribe to the Light of Wisdom and join thousands of awakening souls who refuse to settle for spiritual mediocrity. Hit that notification bell because the revelations we're about to share will challenge everything you thought you knew about your spiritual identity. The persecution of light. The journey of chosen souls inevitably leads to a profound and often painful realization. Not everyone will understand or support their spiritual evolution. As their light begins to shine more brightly, it exposes the shadows in the lives of others, creating discomfort, resistance, and sometimes outright hostility from people they once considered spiritual allies. This phenomenon isn't unique to our modern era. Throughout history, those who have experienced genuine spiritual awakening have faced rejection, criticism, and persecution from the very religious communities they once called home. The master teacher, Jesus himself, exemplified this pattern. He was rejected by the religious establishment of his time, criticized by those who should have recognized his divine mission, and ultimately crucified by a system that felt threatened by his message of direct divine connection. His disciples faced similar persecution, being expelled from synagogues, imprisoned for their beliefs, and killed for refusing to conform to religious expectations that they knew violated spiritual truth. The chosen ones of today walk in this same tradition, facing modern forms of spiritual persecution for their unwillingness to compromise their divine calling. When a chosen soul begins to question religious authority, challenge institutional practices, or seek spiritual truth outside approved channels, the response is often swift and decisive. They may be labeled as rebellious, prideful, or deceived. Family members who once supported their faith journey suddenly become concerned about their spiritual welfare. Friends distance themselves, uncomfortable with questions that challenge their own comfortable assumptions about religious truth. Church leaders may attempt to counsel them back into conformity, using various forms of spiritual manipulation to maintain institutional control. This rejection is particularly painful because it often comes from people who claim to love God and seek spiritual truth. The chosen ones discover that many individuals prefer the security of religious conformity over the uncertainty of genuine spiritual growth. They learn that institutional loyalty often trumps divine calling in the minds of those who have become more attached to their religious identity than to their spiritual destiny. This realization can be devastating, leading to periods of profound loneliness and spiritual questioning. However, the chosen ones eventually understand that this persecution is actually a confirmation of their spiritual authenticity. Throughout mystical traditions, it's recognized that those who pose a threat to spiritual complacency will always face resistance from those who benefit from maintaining the status quo. The very intensity of the opposition they face becomes evidence that they're touching something real, something that has the power to transform not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them. The isolation that chosen souls experience often leads them to discover a deeper truth. They are never truly alone. As they develop their direct relationship with the divine, they find a companionship that transcends human understanding. They discover that the Creator is not distant or disinterested, but intimately involved in every aspect of their spiritual journey. This divine companionship provides strength, comfort, and guidance that no human relationship could ever match. Moreover, as chosen souls remain faithful to their spiritual calling despite external pressure, they begin to attract others who share their hunger for authentic divine connection. They discover that there are many others who have been experiencing the same spiritual restlessness, the same dissatisfaction with religious superficiality, and the same calling to something deeper and more transformative. These connections form the basis of a new kind of spiritual community, one based on shared divine experience rather than institutional affiliation. The mission unfolds as chosen souls mature in their spiritual journey and weather the storms of religious persecution. They begin to understand the larger purpose behind their calling. They realize that their spiritual awakening isn't ultimately about their own personal fulfillment, though that is certainly part of the divine blessing they receive. Instead, they discover that they have been prepared for a mission that extends far beyond their individual spiritual growth. They are meant to be catalysts for spiritual transformation in a world desperately hungry for authentic divine connection. This mission doesn't usually involve grand gestures or dramatic public demonstrations. Instead, it manifests through the quiet revolution of transformed consciousness expressing itself in daily life. When chosen souls live from their authentic spiritual center, they become beacons of possibility for others who are still trapped in religious conformity or spiritual confusion. Their peace in the midst of chaos, their confidence in divine provision, and their ability to love unconditionally become testimony to the reality of direct divine relationship. The chosen ones often find themselves in conversations with seekers who are questioning their own religious experiences. They become safe spaces for people to express doubts, ask forbidden questions, and explore spiritual possibilities that their religious communities would never permit. Without trying to create a new religious movement or establish themselves, as spiritual authorities, they simply share their experiences and encourage others to seek their own direct divine connections. This organic spiritual mentorship requires great wisdom and discernment. The chosen ones must learn to respect each individual's unique spiritual journey while offering encouragement for authentic seeking. They understand that they cannot force spiritual awakening on anyone, but they can create environments where such awakening becomes possible. They learn to plant seeds of spiritual curiosity rather than trying to harvest immediate conversions to their way of thinking. The mission of chosen souls also involves holding space for divine energy in a world that has largely forgotten its spiritual nature. They become prayer warriors who intercede for humanity's spiritual awakening. They serve as energetic anchors, maintaining connection between heaven and earth through their consistent spiritual practice and unwavering faith. Their very presence in communities, workplaces, and social circles raises the spiritual vibration and creates opportunities for others to encounter the divine in unexpected ways. As the chosen ones embrace their mission more fully, they often discover supernatural abilities and spiritual gifts that they never knew they possessed. They may find themselves receiving prophetic insights, experiencing miraculous healings, or demonstrating extraordinary wisdom in complex situations. These manifestations aren't meant to make them feel special or superior to others. Instead, they're tools provided by the divine to help them fulfill their mission more effectively. The Dark Night, Initiation. Every chosen soul must eventually pass through what mystics throughout the ages have called the dark night of the soul. This is not a punishment or a sign of spiritual failure, but rather an initiation into deeper levels of divine communion that cannot be accessed through intellectual understanding or emotional enthusiasm alone. It's a sacred stripping away of all false supports, superficial comforts, and external validations that have previously sustained their spiritual journey. In this profound darkness, they discover resources within themselves that they never knew existed. The dark night often begins just when chosen souls feel most confident in their spiritual progress. They may have established consistent prayer and meditation practices, experienced profound divine encounters, and begun to step into their mission with courage and enthusiasm. Then, suddenly, the spiritual consolations that previously sustained them seem to vanish. Prayer feels empty and mechanical. Meditation becomes a struggle against restless thoughts and emotional turbulence. The divine presence that once felt so close and real seems to have withdrawn completely. During these periods of spiritual desolation, chosen souls face their deepest fears, unresolved traumas, and hidden attachments. They're forced to confront aspects of themselves that they've been avoiding or denying. Old wounds resurface with surprising intensity. Doubts about their spiritual calling, their divine experiences, and even their fundamental beliefs about God's existence may flood their consciousness. The temptation to abandon their spiritual journey and return to the relative security of religious conformity or materialistic pursuits becomes overwhelming. This is precisely the point where many potential chosen souls turn back. The intensity of the inner confrontation feels unbearable, and the absence of obvious divine comfort makes them question whether they've made a terrible mistake in pursuing direct divine relationship. However, those who persevere through this spiritual crucifixion discover that it's actually the doorway to resurrection into a completely new level of spiritual reality. The dark night serves multiple purposes in the chosen soul's development. It burns away spiritual pride and self-righteousness that may have accumulated during periods of intense divine experience. It teaches absolute dependence on divine grace rather than personal spiritual achievement. It develops unshakable faith, that doesn't require constant emotional confirmation or supernatural experiences. Most importantly, it prepares them to minister to others who will inevitably face similar spiritual crises. In the depths of the dark night, chosen souls learn to worship God, not for what they receive, but simply for who God is. They discover a love that doesn't depend on feelings, a faith that doesn't require proof, and a commitment that transcends circumstances. This purified spiritual foundation becomes the basis for everything they will accomplish in their mission. They emerge from this initiation with the authority and authenticity that comes only from having wrestled with God and refused to let go until they received a blessing. The community of light. One of the most profound discoveries that chosen souls make is that they are not alone in their spiritual journey. Despite the isolation they may feel when separating from institutional religion, there exists an invisible network of awakened souls throughout the world who share their commitment to authentic divine relationship. This community transcends geographical boundaries, denominational differences, and cultural limitations. It's held together not by organizational structure or human leadership, but by the unifying presence of divine love that flows through each member. This spiritual community operates on frequencies that are invisible to those still trapped in religious thinking. Chosen souls recognize each other through spiritual resonance rather than external markers. They may meet in the most unlikely places: grocery stores, coffee shops, online forums, or chance encounters during travel. When their paths cross, there's an immediate recognition, a knowing that goes beyond personality preferences or shared interests. They recognize fellow travelers on the path of divine intimacy. The support that chosen souls provide for each other is unlike anything available in traditional religious communities. Because they've all walked through similar spiritual initiations, they can offer understanding and encouragement that comes from personal experience rather than theoretical knowledge. They know the unique challenges of living between two worlds, the mundane reality that most people inhabit, and the spiritual dimension where they feel most at home. These connections often develop into profound spiritual friendships that provide mutual accountability, prayer support, and wisdom sharing. Chosen souls learn from each other's experiences, celebrate each other's spiritual victories, and provide comfort during times of testing and trial. They create safe spaces where questions can be asked, doubts can be expressed, and spiritual experiences can be shared without judgment or religious correction. The community of chosen souls also serves as a powerful force for planetary spiritual transformation. When they gather, either physically or through spiritual connection across distances, they create concentrated fields of divine energy that impact entire regions. Their united prayers and meditations help accelerate the spiritual awakening of humanity and provide protection for other souls who are beginning their own journey toward divine connection. You've heard the call. You've recognized the truth in these words because it resonates with something deep within your soul. The question now is, what will you do with this recognition? Will you allow fear, comfort, or social pressure to keep you trapped in spiritual mediocrity? Or will you have the courage to step into your identity as one of the chosen? Join our community of awakened souls here at the Light of Wisdom. Subscribe now and become part of a movement that's transforming spiritual reality across the planet. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the revelations that could change your life forever. Share this message with others who you sense might be ready to hear this truth. Together, we're not just individuals seeking God. We are the chosen generation preparing the way for humanity's greatest spiritual awakening. The path of the chosen soul is not easy, but it is the most rewarding journey any human being can undertake. It leads to dimensions of divine relationship that most people never dream possible. It opens doors to spiritual experiences that transform every aspect of existence. It connects you with a community of light that spans the globe and transcends time itself. Remember, you were chosen before you were born for this exact moment in history. Your spiritual restlessness, your dissatisfaction with religious superficiality, and your hunger for authentic divine connection are not problems to be solved. They are invitations to step into your spiritual destiny. The Creator of the universe is calling your name. The only question is whether you'll have the courage to answer. The world needs your light. Humanity is crying out for the authentic spiritual leadership that only chosen souls can provide. Don't hide your gifts under the basket of social conformity or religious expectation. Let your light shine before men, not so they'll praise you, but so they'll be inspired to seek the same divine connection that has transformed your life. The journey continues. The mission awaits. Your time is now.